I'd like to welcome everyone to the Infrastructure Committee this morning. This morning we will be receiving oral evidence from the Department for Infrastructure on developers' contributions for wastewater infrastructure. We will be considering a written briefing from the Department of Infrastructure on the Active Travel Delivery Plan. We will consider the Assembly raised paper on car parking charges and also consider 3 proposals for statutory rules that are not subject to Assembly procedure. I would like to inform everyone in attendance in the public gallery that they can use mobile phones, but that no recordings or photographs should be taken. And if members are content, I will therefore just proceed on through the agenda. Item 1 is apologies. Are any members aware of any apologies?
We have Nicola Brogan and Peter McReynolds.
Nicola Brogan and Peter McReynolds. That's absolutely fine. Nothing else notified there. Item 2 is declarations of interests. Members are reminded that they should declare any relevant interests. Does any member have any interest they want to declare? Okay. Which takes us on to chairperson's business. The sort of 2 items. One, if a committee are content in terms of car parking, we'll maybe tie in with the raise paper and have a chat about it there because there's a particular item and some media around that I want to just pick up on. The other item is myself and another committee member, Andrew, were on Good Morning Ulster talking about gullies and drains last week. I think it was generally very congenial discussion and very useful, but in essence, live on radio, I did say that the committee would certainly consider this item. I didn't commit the committee to doing anything on it because that's not my power, but I did say we would raise it. And really this is a discussion around whose responsibility it is to, there's 2 aspects to it: to clean leaves off our streets and then make sure the gullies are clear so that water flows clearly through them. Andrew, I'm gonna let you come in here if there's anything that you want to share around the wider issue, because I'm also cognizant that your particular constituency has had its fair share of flooding.
No, Chair, I think you're right, and I think thank you very much. I think it does just sort of come back to the wider issue. We've discussed it here about gully cleaning and about the department and how that role they takes, and unfortunately, rightly or wrongly, it is the one thing that is very visible to people when it's not working. That it's not working, and just it's about how we get it right, how we ensure that the department is doing all that they can to make sure that A, they are cleared, B, that people see them being cleared and that they are working. And I think that's really my main point. We do see it, I'm sure I don't want to make it a constituency clinic as such, but across the board we'll see and we'll hear about persistent drains, persistent gullies that aren't cleared, and what can be done about them. So, and it is a seasonal thing, and I think just whatever joined up approach, that's what people want to see as well. Is just a bit of joined up approach and communication here as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Harry.
Thank you very much, Chair. No, just a wee comment, Chair. That it's all well and good, fancy curbs, new drainage, directing it where we're directing the water to, and good thoughts and good policies, but if the drains aren't kept clear, it's a huge problem. I know in many cases when the big hoover goes out to clean them out, if there's lots of them, I'm sure we'll see in all our areas, all the areas are the same, they're nearly more like window boxes. You see grass growing out of them and there's no way water can get down there. So I think the main thing, as I say, the policy is well and good putting in all these things, but they need maintained. Maintenance is the main thing.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
We'll all have, I suppose, a view from how DFI and council work together in our own constituencies, and I would have to reflect that in my constituency it works very well, and I certainly reflected that in the media that I did. However, I did say that we would have this discussion, and it would be my view, and it's up to committee to decide this, the tenor of the debate last week around this item was whose responsibility is it to effectively to move leaves, in the most part, from the pavements. And in particular, this was a debate between Belfast City Council and the department, and there were slightly conflicting statements that were being aired. So I think, probably to be fair to Andrew and I, we were very considered on it in terms of just saying, well, this thing's sorted in some way and not coming down on one side or the other. However, if committee are agreed, certainly my view would be that we write out to the department for a wee bit of clarity, and we write out to Belfast City Council, because if Belfast City Council are saying, well, it's not really our responsibility to clear the leaves, and yet, other councils perhaps are actually doing that, and they perhaps do see that either as their responsibility or are doing it out of goodwill, and there's no issue, and there's a more joined up approach between council and DFI. My view would be we should at least write to DFI and to Belfast City Council and see where they are on the issue, and has it been reconciled in some way, because all we really want to do is see the water flowing. I'm happy to take views on that. You came in a little bit late. We're just talking about gullies and leaves and drainage clearing. Does anyone else have any views they want to?
Chair, I suppose the only thing, I don't want to make too much work for anybody as such, but is it worth actually writing to all councils on this matter again, because I'm sure it's a across the board issue, and the other thing is, it's just not, I don't think we should get, the issue raised was about leaves, but again, it's not just the leaves that block the gullies. Again, you have a dry-ish summer, general detritus gathers up and then gets washed in, blocked up,
sure.
Again, so that's sort of, and then it's also just as well, obviously, from memory, the council have their scarab sweepers that go about the roadside, if that makes sense,
yep.
and sweep up. And again, then obviously DFI either have their own or they're contracted jet gusher things that unblock the gully. So again, it's more just to try and have an audit of what's doing what and how they're working together. Chair, would be my sort of only suggestion. Sorry.
Okay, no, that's absolutely fine, Andrew. Cahill?
Thanks, Chair. Apologies. Caught in traffic. The issue for me, obviously we all understand, I mean, it's plain and simple, adapted footpaths of DFA, simple as that, and then you have gully clean. Some of them are contacted out, but I think under the Clean Neighbourhoods Bill there was an understanding across councils to look at that a bit, keeping some of that stuff. So maybe that's the start, but I would agree with contacting councils, because some of them are, it's like in the old days of the housing executive, they start taking over some of the contracts, council come back and there's an amalgamation of things there, but if you ask most people, gully cleaning certainly would be DFA, and footpaths are a DFA issue per se, but there is some contractual arrangements through. I know certainly when we brought that Clean Neighbourhoods Bill in, there was stuff there around different councils. So I don't know if it's a signed up agreement or whatever it is, but it's just to clarify ourselves for ourselves and identify, and if something we need to look at from here, from a legislative point of view or something, certainly would look at it. All right, Chair.
That's fine, Cahill. Anyone else on this?
Yes, Chair,
John?
for me. I think that it's a really good discussion, actually. These are the key things that the department is meant to be doing. I wrote to the Minister particularly around the Shore Road in Larne last week. We have seen significant flooding there, and it's one of the main causes is the build-up of the gullies, the drains, whether it be leaves or silt. And in the usual response, British government austerity was blamed for it. Even though the finance is up again, it is a responsibility of the department to clear gullies and drainways. And I do think at times it's a penny wise and pound foolish decision to overlook the impact that these can have, particularly the damage that's caused to the roads as a result of flooding. Not to clear a gully that results in flooding that cause hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of damage, rather than sending out the teams to do the areas that are most cause to flooding, seems to me to be a little bit short-sighted. It does say that there is an aim to do it once a year, but that's not even a commitment, it's an aim.
Yeah.
And that on some occasions ad hoc responses are undertaken by officials within the department to go out and look at those. But what we see time and time again are the same areas being caused, often because of the same uncleared drains, particularly ones along shorefronts, and we have those in many of our constituencies, where water is coming from higher ground, landing on shorefronts and not getting in. It is a really simple solution. that isn't being taken advantage of, and then is causing road closures, significant damage, and further cost to the department. To me, it just seems totally short-sighted. I'm not saying it's an easy solution all the time. I'm not saying that they're going to get them all right, but I think on certain occasions they have the responsibility to get these cleared.
I think, picking up on the Deputy Chair's point there, I think what is clear to me is that there is a level of evidence when there's heavy rain. I know from my consideration, when there's heavy rain, there are certain areas that have a propensity to flood and roads that will flood, and I think that evidence, if it's collated, at least will give some idea to the department in terms of which gullies are mission critical, if I can put it that way, to try and keep clear. Like, I don't want to dwell on this one. If committee are content to take Andrew's proposal there around just writing to all councils to get a little bit of clarity around who's responsible.
Sorry, Chair, we need to be careful. I understand whose responsibility is. We need to be careful then what we're actually asking of councils in terms of, it's more of a working relationship type thing as opposed to a responsibility type thing.
Do you want to suggest, Michael?
Yep.
Yeah. So in the first instance, if members were content to write to the department just to ask about responsibility and how often they're cleared, and then I understand that there is an agreement between councils.
In some cases, I'm not saying, but the responsibility lays. The responsibility lays clearly with the DFA. There's no point in saying it's not. All I'm saying is, if you're going to write to council, you need to know what we're asking of them. And if I was in council, I'd say, well, the responsibility lays with the DFA. Or to know under the Clean Neighbourhoods Bill, there's some agreements and some, but there could be ad hoc agreements that may not be non-official. That's all I'm saying to you. All I do know is in some cases the local fire service has been out, cleaned out in some emergency cases, cleaned the flood, and we've seen that ourselves in our own area. But ultimately it's the DFA's responsibility to clean the gullies and the footpaths. They have adopted them, it's their responsibility to clean the leaves, and that's the rules and regulations. So, but I know that some areas deal with slightly different, but and that's why I'm saying that if we write to council, we need to know what they're asking. That's it.
And Chair, if you'll permit me, I was just going to suggest that rather than write to all the councils, to maybe get research in the library to look at it in the first instance, if there's an agreement around this kind of thing, just to see what they can find in terms of cross-council stuff, because we could get lots of different answers back from different councils.
Sure.
If members are content with that.
Sure, sorry to come in, and I don't want to add to this, and maybe it can be a separate piece of work. I'm sort of reluctant to mention snow and ice because I know as a local representative the chaos it causes, but there is a similar overlap or ambiguity around rules of council and rules of DFI when it comes to gritting as well. Some councils, for example, take town centres and footpaths under their purview, others don't, and then we get calls asking why this isn't being done and that's being done. It's not the same thing, but they're similar points, and it's that relationship and that interrelationship between the two. If there's any way that Ray's and or the letter could ask for clarity around that as well, potentially it'd be useful, or a separate piece of work. I'm not going to down a ditch over it.
Let's take it, John. If you want to store that one, bring it back in.
When it starts snowing.
Yeah. We'll see if we can get the gullies clear first.
Next week, John. It's coming next week.
But Michael, are you content enough then in terms of what we're doing?
It's to write to the department to ask for responsibility, whose responsibility to clear leaves, how often they're cleared generally, and what interface there is with local councils in that work.
That's fine.
And then to ask research or the library to look just at what coordination has been across the councils.
Okay. Justin?
Just in terms of responsibility and where it lies, is it a nod and a wink relationship with councils, or is there formal agreements in place? Just clarify that, please.
And that's the point we're saying.
Yeah. Okay.
The case of nod and a wink.
Okay.
This is flooded and has to be cleared. It's cleared by somebody, you know.
Everyone content with that? Apologies, we haven't got past chairperson business. It's now pushing 10:20. Okay, that's the only thing that I had. We'll pick up a little bit on car parking at the raised paper. Draft minutes, page 7. You can see the draft minutes of proceedings on the 5th of November. Remember, if members are content that the minutes are true and accurate, I will sign the minutes. Are members content? Yeah, okay. That's great. Takes us on to item 5, matters arising. At page 18, you will see the clerk's memo relating to the appearance of ministers at statutory committees. And that's just for information, really, unless anyone wants to bring anything up around it. And then just to remind members as well that the committee did agree to write to the Minister to request attendance at the committee in advance of the scheduled meeting in February 26. At page 20, we have the House of Lords legislative process paper, and it was agreed at our meeting on the 5th of November that the committee clerk would furnish members with this information. Just a slight note from me, it's quite an interesting paper. We have had some discussion around Henry VIII clauses. It deals in some detail with those as it relates to the bill. So certainly encourage members to have a look at that because I'm sure that will come back. At page 33, we have the clerk's memo on the follow-up briefing to the briefing that we had by the examiner for statutory rules, and members can peruse that at their leisure. And then we also have tabled at page 3 the bill paper on water, sustainable drainage and flood management. Just to mention to members that there are certain points of information or clarity were asked for following the briefing from the examiner of statutory rules. I know some members asked for specific details on that. Justin, you were mentioning about the SUDS bill and the what was going on in the Republic. Some of that information is now in there. Certainly that you come in, that members come in. Do any members have any matters they want to raise on anything that I've highlighted so far? People generally content. Michael, do you want to clarify anything that I've said? Are you happy enough?
No, it was just as a rundown in the clerk's brief there that was tabled yesterday, just around the things that members wanted to follow up on from the examiner of statutory rules. There will be a summary provided at next week's meeting as a separate agenda item, just to consider what members want to do following that. Around the LDPs, the department actually just has a coordinating role. There's no particular, they don't have an oversight role in terms of the LDPs, so just that information there. And Mr McNulty was asking about comparisons with the Republic, and there was a bill paper provided by research before your time in the committee that has some comparisons, but if there's more that you need, then research can look at that. So those were the main things. And just on the Henry VIII powers, Harry was also asking about if you can do something, you can also undo something, and there's some information there on where that comes from, and just the breadth of a Henry VIII power. Yeah. Okay.
Can I check members are
Chair, and I know it tuned in online, but it was an excellent session, and I think it was important the advice was given on the conversation we had. So it'll be interesting. Obviously, over the period, we'll have her back in if we need her. It's just as funny talking about the Henry VIII clauses once again. It certainly comes up in this committee a lot, to be fair, but I thought that the answer on the session was very, very good.
Yeah. No, it was really, really excellent. I have to say I haven't come across any legislation that I've seen, and I've seen a few in different guises, but I haven't seen Henry VIII. It's new to me on this committee, but it'll be a crucial aspect as we look at the bill and as we engage with the department around trying to obviously make this bill as good as we can. Members content to finish off 5? Yeah? Okay. Which takes us on to 6. And that is correspondence. I will pick up a few items, and then I'm going to ask if members have anything else that they want to raise, and then we'll note the rest. So the correspondence members at page 64, people want to follow through the various items. First one I want to pick up is page 67, which is the response from the Minister to the committee regarding the Egyptian arch in Newry, and you'll see that. And there is, there's a line that certainly I picked up on the second page, and I want to just highlight this. It says where a sign or advertisement is not an immediate danger to road users, it is generally more appropriate to seek its removal through agreement with the owner. Now, the owner in this case, I believe, is the Minister's party, and I don't want this to stray into politics. This is a factual thing, and for me, again, I will make clear that for me, obviously the Minister is responsible for planning in Northern Ireland and planning enforcement, and obviously the fact that this is her party sign is the issue for me. However, that is the most interesting line. Members will take other views on this, and I'm sure we'll hear a few in a second. My view, notwithstanding any other members' views on it, is that, and it seems insane that I'm going to say this out loud, but we write to the Minister and ask, has she asked her party to remove the sign? Because that's what she's kind of said in her letter. I'm going to park it there. I'm going to let other members come in. Justin.
Thank you, Chair. Listen, I think the letter that the Minister has sent to the committee poses more questions than actual answers. She's now using the word that some of the posts appear to be situated at DFA property, when her predecessor, the Minister O'Dowd, said it wasn't DFA property. Who else's property is the legal billboard erected on? Could we clarify that from the Minister, please? So, is it appear or is on DFA property? Which one is it? Could you just clarify that, please? See clarity on that front. Obviously, no minister was in place in post when the correspondence, the enforcement was served to Sinn Féin's constituency office. And which constituency office was it? Was it the one in Newry, or was it Cal's in Armagh, or was it the one in Crossmaglen? Maybe Cal might tell us that one. In terms of there's no enforcement action, enforcement has been served, as said, and like you've said, does Sinn Féin have any plans to remove this illegal billboard? And if it was a DUP billboard in the heart of Newry, would they be so blasé about it? I doubt that very much. How was the risk established? To what criteria were used to establish the risk of this billboard, which is erected on a height? Was it constructed according to the Design Manual for Roads and Bridges? Were the foundations structurally sound? Is the steelwork structurally sound? This is a major construction. And is visual assessment enough to establish whether this is safe for road users? Obviously, major conflict of interest issues. Should be removed because it poses a threat to the safety of road users, or should it be removed because it's illegal? Which one is it? Does the criminal justice system need to be engaged in this process? Because we clarify that with the Minister. Should it be removed because it poses a threat to road users, or should it be removed because it is an illegal construction by a political party, the main party of government, her own party? Which one is it?
I think I'll probably take your last question there. I suspect it's a civil matter in terms of planning enforcement. Michael has been scribbling madly here. I will, at the end of this item, ask him to just make sure all those points are covered, Justin. Look, I'm happy to take any other members' views on it if they wish to share any. Harry?
Thank you very much, Chair. I think, Chair, if we just first of all write the LPS, establish who the landowner is, and you've had a complaint about a sign, and then just it's the responsibility of the landowner, really. So just go about it normal way. Okay, thank you.
Yes, Chair.
John?
I think Justin hits the nail on the head in regards to this issue. I can't believe that we're back dealing with this again. This has been going on for years. The previous minister clarified that it was on DFI land and that notification was being given, and now the minister's come back to say there's ambiguity around it. It's just outrageous. This is an illegal sign on public land that is causing a risk to road safety that shouldn't be there. If it was a local business advertising their wares, trying to promote their living, there have been instances where they've not only been removed, but they have been fined for it. And yet this has dragged on for years because it's a political slogan owned by a political party belonging to the Minister for Infrastructure, whose previous colleague said it was on their land. It's just outrageous. I just don't understand why it's so hard to get this resolved. I can't even believe that we're having to deal with it again at the committee and it just goes round in circles. How long is too long? It just get it resolved. It's totally and utterly unacceptable. And if it was any other party, any other message, and probably any other local business trying to just make a living by advertising their wares, it would be down by now and potentially a fine issued. I just think it's disgraceful.
Well, Justin?
One final
Sure.
point, and that is she didn't answer the question, and why did she not answer the question around suitable consents being sought from the rail, NI rail, in relation to construction in the proximity of a railway line, the main railway line on this island between Dublin and Belfast? Why was that question not answered?
We'll get that done as well.
Chair, just
Andrew?
one quick point again. I don't clearly want to get lost in the weeds in this, if that makes sense.
Yep.
But I think, and that sort of echoes some of the sentiments that we're discussing signs and what have you, and that seems to be a tendency in this place at the minute to talk about signs and get ourselves lost in the weeds. For me, it's due process. If due process has been followed, then that's all well and good. If it hasn't been followed and hasn't been acted upon, well, I think that tells its own story. I think due process is the main issue here.
I think, in summary, before I hand to Michael, just to make sure that he's captured all the points. For me, raising this, I feel a level of it seems a little bit insane whenever I say, look, has the minister talked to her own party to see if she can get the board down? That phrase in itself seems a little bit inane. There are two issues for me. One is the fact that the enforcement of this, as has been reflected by this committee, if this was a commercial business or one of our constituents, we know as elected MLAs that that is carried out expeditiously, and yet it hasn't in this case. And so when we deal with those as constituency MLAs, I find it difficult. If somebody brought this to me and said, but this hasn't happened. Why is this Egyptian arch thing? That makes it difficult for me. And the other issue is just the fact that it is the minister who's responsible for planning enforcement, and it is her party. And that line really stuck out with me regarding it is generally more appropriate to seek its removal through the agreement with the owner. And the whole thing seems nearly beyond me. But anyway, I feel this is important. This is what this committee does. It scrutinises and it doesn't let go of these issues until they're resolved. And that would be my modus operandi, regardless of what the issue is. I think we do that best when we don't make it overly political. Michael, I'm going to hand over to you to see how much you've captured.
Justin.
Just very quickly, I agree wholeheartedly with the message on the billboard. Actually, some unions had a bit of fun with there a couple of weeks ago. They changed the message to Northern Ireland is for everybody and put a Union Jack crest on, which was entertaining.
Okay.
But
disclosure, it wasn't me, Justin.
Listen, I agree wholeheartedly with the message on the billboard, and there are those billboards all around South Armagh. At every junction have one message. Shouldn't be have those all around this county as well. So it's not just at the Egyptian Arch.
Now, look, I understand it. I suspect committee members may take different views on what is on the billboard. What is on the billboard is inconsequential to me. I suspect it's maybe a political message, which I may or may not agree with, but that doesn't matter. It's just a fact. The billboard's there, and that's a killer for me. Okay, Michael.
If members are content, what I've heard is a letter to the Minister asking whether the Minister has engaged with the billboard owner or erector in order to remove the billboard. The letter states that it appears to be on DFI land. Could the Minister confirm whether it is or isn't on DFI land. When there were no ministers in place, to whom did the department write to have the billboard removed specifically? And does the minister know if the owner or erector of the billboard has plans to remove it? If the billboard belonged to another political party, would it have been approached in a different way? What were the criteria to establish the risk or lack of risk to road users? And whether there was consultation with the department or with TransLink for the erecting of the billboard. Was there anything else members wanted in there?
Just in the vicinity to a railway line, that's a very important point.
I think he got that in the last point there, Justin. Yeah. Thanks, Mike. Okay.
Proximity to a railway line.
Okay, so are members content that we send that letter to the minister?
Intent.
Okay. Okay, moving on, still with me, page 69. This is a response to the minister regarding the DAERA engagement for the A5 project. So we have now 2 letters in regarding this. We did write to both ministers, the DFI and DAERA minister, asking for some level of engagement around this. We now have both letters back. Both letters are saying the same thing, essentially that they will not be commenting on this matter at this time. We have written to DFI and DAERA requesting dates and minutes of the meetings between their departments on planning for the A5 project. In terms of my view on this, and I will read this out again, and I will read it every week until we get some solution and transparency on it. Justice McAlinden wrote at paragraph 200, the DFI statement does not detail or contain any reference to any such evidence being provided by DAERA, and in contrast with the evidence provided by the Department for the Economy at the hearing of this matter, nothing was forthcoming from DAERA to indicate that prior to DFI making its decision. Okay, so on these 2 letters, here's what we know. It is the job of this committee to provide scrutiny on these matters. There's no doubt in anyone's mind that this meets the required public interest test. The appeal, which is going to take place, which we are not talking about, but let's just address that, the appeal will be heard by 3 High Court judges and not a jury. So actually, whilst the matter is sub judice, it's going to be heard by 3 judges and not a jury. We are not inquiring about evidence or proceedings that are live, but rather an explanation of something that's already in the public domain, which is a ruling made by a High Court judge in a case that has already been heard. Okay. Further, the committee's received legal advice. I have it here for very good reason. I can't make reference to that legal advice, nor can any member of this committee speak to it. However, I would make the general point that the legal advice we have received seems to run in contrast to what the ministers are saying to us. I don't know where the feeling in this case is, right? But it is absolutely clear to me that Justice McAlinden thinks there was a very, very clear feeling between DAERA and DFI in the coordination between those departments, and somebody massively dropped the ball in that case. So, I mean, I at this point in time, I am content to wait to see what comes back in terms of the requested dates and minutes, in terms of the planning, as these 2 departments coordinated their response to the JR. But equally, I want to give the committee, any committee members who want to express a view on this, space to do that. But that would be my position at this point in time. Does anyone have any views on this or wants to speak to it?
Sure, if I just may ask, your points are well made. I don't want to echo them again. and pardon me, did we get a response, or were they not able to clarify the ambiguity around the finance and the money that was potentially set aside for the A5? Was any response being able to provide to that, or was that also included in the inability to answer the question? Do you remember that there's several £100 million that was potentially, had been set aside for the A5, and we were trying to seek clarity on A, would it be spent in the A5 in the current financial year, and if not, then B, where would that money go to? Mm-hmm. Has that answer been received? It has.
Will, do you want to speak to that?
Yes, there's correspondence in members' packs, which is in response to the committee's meeting on the 15th of October, which provides a response from the Minister there around the funding. So if you go to...
Oh, it's included in that one, is it?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I'm gonna actually. It's a good point, John, and you are clearly prophetic. It's probably my next item. I'm going to raise at page 70, but yeah, they have provided a wee bit of clarity. So I suppose I intend to pick just that memo up at page 70 as the next item on core. But I suppose if anyone has any specific views on anything that I've shared regarding the committee's thoughts on how we proceed. As I said, notwithstanding what I've said, and I've outlined as far as I can my views on it, I am content at this point in time to wait to see what the ministers write back to us in terms of minutes, frequency, length and detail, and then, you know, just for clarity, if they think we're going to drop this or I'm going to drop it, they are mistaken, because this is £2 billion of public money with a further £1 billion in major infrastructure coming down, and we are asking the departments, why did Justice McAlinden make that statement? Does anyone else have any views on this? Justin?
Just very quickly, I think your points are well made, Chair. Do we have any clarity now on timelines? What are the implications for programme? Can we seek that information?
In terms of timelines, my understanding is the case is going to be heard in December. That case could run for a while, and then I would expect the appeal court judges to take their time. I think those packs are going to be sizable. I'm not sure, and you know, it probably sometime next year we'll get a judgment. I'm not sure what impact that has on the department. If you have a particular course of action, we can certainly consider writing to the department. If there's something you want to...
I think we should write to the department and seek an updated timeline on the delivery of the F5, given where it stands in the courts and what the implications are for that on programme.
Okay, we can do that. Yep. Okay, so subject to anything else there, we have one action, if members are content, that we write to the department regarding that, and that we park the item until we hear back from the two ministers regarding dates and minutes. Are members content? Somebody used to say yes?
Yes.
Yep. Okay. So next item is page 70 that I want to pick up, and I'm sure members will be thrilled. It's the last one from me. It's a response to minister regarding a query from committee on the 15th of October. We had written to the minister on clarity on why we had written to the minister regarding effectively the budgets and the comparative budgets. I think that's probably closer. You'll see that, and it's a really interesting, and I want to thank the department for getting back to us on this. It certainly makes it clear to me around where the comparative budgets are for 24-25 and 25-26. John, in reference to your question, there are some figures around there in terms of the capital budget under ring-fenced RRI, and you see the flagship stuff there, which are interesting in themselves. I suppose I do have a question. I wanted to flag up one aspect of that correspondence, which rolls on for, I think, maybe 4 pages. So I just want to pick up and just share with the committee one line in particular that I noted. And it says, my department has not drawn down any cash towards the A5 project from the Shared Island Fund commitment of 600 million. And I suppose my question is, given that there has been spend on the A5, and it's more just, again, just for scrutiny, I don't have the answer to this, but in terms of how the department spends money on the A5, what are the criteria as to whether it spends executive money or whether it spends shared island fund money? And I just kind of like to know the answer to that. I don't know what it is, unless somebody else wants to tell me. I'm a newbie on the committee, but that was sort of one thing that I kind of picked up on and would be interested to know the answer to. Short of that, if anyone else wants to pick up anything from that paper, which again is useful, if you want to indicate to me, I'll certainly take an item on it. Harry?
Just a comment, Chair, say fair question and interesting question. I look forward to hearing the answer. Thank
Yep.
you.
The only other thing I'll just flag up, which I don't want to take time on here, and the active travel people probably think I now hate them because this is going on forever, but this is our job. There's another line in that regarding a 10-year parking enforcement contract. Now, I did ask the Minister a little bit about this last night. I didn't expect the Minister to have an answer, given that she was talking about car parking in Lisburn and Newry, and a little bit about Bangor. But clearly there's a new contract. I think we'll pick that up maybe again if we can park that to the raise item. And John has already indicated to me that certainly I think we'd want to have a wee look at this. There are some changes. I wasn't aware of this, but there's a line there about a new 10-year parking enforcement contract, which members may be interested in. I just want to flag that up more for members' attention than anything else. Unless anyone's got anything else on that paper, are we just content to write to the Minister just asking the criteria around breakdown around A5 shared island funding and whether that's how that spend is, what the criteria are for that spend, as to whether it's shared island or just for clarity, really. Yeah, members content. Okay. Anyone else got anything on that one? Brilliant. Okay.
On core, Chair, or just generally?
No, that's on that item. Are you happy enough?
Sorry, Chair, I do have one.
You got
yeah,
on that one?
On this one.
Go ahead, John.
It's just on back to the active travel budget. I had
Yep.
requested before directly, but still not received it. It's good to see that there is an increasing budget for it, but I think as a committee it would be good to see where that's broken down to. It's all well and good saying the overall spend is £52 million. I'd like to know on what. And then we can scrutinise how it's ticking the active travel budget or boxes or not at this stage.
Yep. Happy with that. Members content? Yeah, I hadn't forgotten, don't worry. Okay, so that's my stuff from the core. Does anyone else have anything in core they want to raise? Andrew?
Yeah, just 6.6 and 6.7. Just curious from the clerks, maybe when will this form part of a committee evidence session at all, or will it form part of any committee pack regarding the October monitoring round and multi-year budgets? How does that get communicated to us, or what's the process in the committee of that?
Sorry, Chair, we'll liaise with the department as to when the appropriate time will be when those are produced.
Yeah.
And we, if members are content, we'll schedule an oral evidence session.
Yep.
When the appropriate time is, when those things are being compiled. I understand it's fluid at the moment.
It's a great word, Michael. Fluid. It's a really good question, Andrew. I fancy my OneDrive burst into action there, and I have my screen back. Departmental return should be returned to DOF by the 20th of November. My understanding is it'll flow from there, and I expect that the committee will want to look at.
So you mean specifically on the monitoring rather than multi-year budgets?
Yeah, well, the monitoring and just how it's going to come back. So to scrutinise as the chair.
Yeah, Chair, if you'll permit me, just
go ahead, Michael.
We've discussed with the department the appropriate time for having a briefing on the new December-January monitoring. Now, the ideal time would be the 3rd of December, but we're away looking at a SUDS site. We have an external meeting that day, and we've scheduled in an oral briefing from the Construction Employers Federation for that, and then to go and see a SUDS site. If we had an extra oral briefing, that would make that meeting, like a full length meeting, and whether members are still available after that to go and see the SUDS site. So it's up to members really whether they want to hear that on the 3rd at that external meeting, or whether they prefer to put that off till the 10th of December for the oral briefing. We'd still get the written briefing within the timescales required by the Functioning of Government Act.
So this was something, it's a good question, Andy, and I suppose we'll deal with it now. This is something that would have come up in forward work plan in terms of that coordination that Michael has just alluded to. So I suppose perhaps if people give that some thought, and we'll pick it up again in terms of how we deal with that, because actually the October, it's not called December, January monitoring round is going to be very, very crucial. Andrew, are you content that we pick this particular item back up again in the forward work plan, because we do have to make a decision, and it'll be up to the committee to whatever it wants to do regarding that SUDS visit, and just the difficulty in timings around how we get officials in to talk to the bids and so forth, and the returns. So people happy enough with that?
Can we deal with it now?
Yeah, we can. Sure.
I mean,
if you want to.
It's a simple question for us whether they extend their day and we're able to do the SUDS visit and take the thing or not. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm down for that. We've already put that date in the diary. So I mean, it's over to committee members. It would be difficult for me to hang on. Then I can do the morning, like we can do the SUDS stuff, but that's already in the diary for me. So
I think Cal is fine. As you said, let's deal with it now. So our members clear about what the question really is. It's about how much we take on, and the fact that we absolutely need to have officials in. This is a key thing. It's
an important briefing.
It's an important briefing. So it's important that we hear these officials. The question is when. If anyone has any other views on that.
I'll be flexible, Chair. I can come earlier or stay later on the day of the committee.
I think the key question, Chair, is if it's a full meeting on that day that we're in Antrim, whether members are content that they'll stay on and visit the SUDS site afterwards. So that's the key thing. If you've committed in terms of your diaries that much time, or whether there's an assumption that we'd have a slightly shorter meeting and then go and see the SUDS site. It's up to members how they'd like to call that.
Do you have any views? I'm happy to stay and see SUDS, but I don't want to speak for all members as well, because people have different
I don't mind to stay and see SUDS. I possibly don't have as I know that other members have meetings afterwards, but I don't have that meeting after, so I'm only speaking for myself, and I don't mind extending out to but again, I'm very conscious of other members.
Yeah.
I would have a meeting after, but I mean, I'll cancel it if I have to, because it's a one-off and it's important, and we're that far away. Just try and make it work if I can.
Content with the 3rd then, members?
Yeah. I do feel for some members who do have other bits and pieces on. Cal's flagged that up.
Travel too, Chairs.
We're not gonna
like you hang on for the SUDS in the afternoon. It's over. The day is over.
I know that.
It's a different matter. You know what I mean? So.
I think the overall view of committee is that we stay on and have it
3rd of December.
3rd of December. Okay. Okay. I'll take any other items from core that any members want to raise.
Just a brief one again, sorry,
Andrew,
Chair, for 6.7, the annual report. Just there's quite a few key issues and risks there. Resourcing, health and safety, financial, safeguarding infrastructure. Again, something we talked about here as well, about doing these things right. I mean, how's this going to be followed up, or is this how are we going to? What's the crack with this then, Chair?
Right. Well, if you have a particular issue or think that there's any further clarity that's required, or any questions, Andrew, what you could do is simply raise that, and we can write. Now, there's quite a lot in that one, as you highlighted. More than happy that you take that away, and if you had stuff right now, you just flag it up to us. But alternatively,
we'll take it away then, Chair. That's okay.
So you have enough, and you can bring it back AOB next week, whatever you want to do on that.
Just to go back,
John.
apologies, I'd asked for a breakdown of the active travel. There was a link, it just didn't open, and it does give clarity. I just couldn't get onto it, but I've read it. So I don't want to duplicate work for you,
Okay.
to the clerk. Well, it's my
We're not writing on
it's
that.
my silly iPads. Phil probably knew that as well.
Clerk, no, clerk is putting a big line through that action point.
Just won't open. I'm blaming my technology.
Yeah, well, I was struggling with OneDrive as well. I'm right there with you, John. Okay, so look, notwithstanding anything else, are we happy to note the rest? Oh, yep. Okay. That takes us on to item 7. Feel for those poor officials outside. This is developer contributions for wastewater infrastructure consultation. The relevant pages are 299. We have developer contributions consultation for wastewater infrastructure and the written evidence. Page 301, we have the developer contributions for wastewater infrastructure consultations responses report. And at page 309, we have the developer contributions for wastewater infrastructure consultation document. I'd very much like to welcome both Alison and Kiera to the meeting this morning. Alison is the Director of Water and Drainage Policy, and Kiera is the Director of Corporate Strategy and Performance. I just need to get committee agreement that we record this for Hansard. And in that case, I will hand over to Alison and Kiera and invite you to make a presentation, if you wish, up to 10 minutes. On this, and then you will probably expect some questions from committee members. The floor is yours.
Thank you for the opportunity to brief the committee on the outcome of the developer contributions for wastewater infrastructure consultation. A copy of the department's high-level summary report on the consultation responses was sent to the committee in advance of this meeting. Hopefully members have had a chance to read it. The report has not yet been published, though it is intended that it will be in the coming weeks. Before we get to questions, I will very briefly set out the context of the consultation, say what it was about, and outline the top-line findings from the responses. This public consultation is one element of the Minister's three-pronged approach to unlocking the wastewater constraints, which have become one of the main barriers to increasing housing supply. It is best described as a high-level consultation. It was designed to get an insight into what people think about the potential of the concept of developer contributions to help bridge the gap between the significant funding the Department already provides Northern Ireland Water and what is needed to build on the work already being done to release wastewater capacity to support future housing and wider economic development. It was not, and was never intended to be, a consultation on detailed policy proposals on what either a voluntary developer contribution scheme or a compulsory developer wastewater infrastructure levy might look like. Should the Minister decide to proceed with developer contributions, and no next steps decision has been made so far, further policy development, targeted engagement and consultation on legislation would all have to take place. That ministerial decision, when it comes, will be informed by the outcome of the consultation and, of course, any views from this committee, which we will be reporting back. In terms of the consultation itself, it asked consultees if they agreed in principle that a pathway for developer contributions should be introduced, and if so, whether they preferred a voluntary or mandatory contribution model, that is, a levy. It also asked some high-level questions about how a voluntary or compulsory contribution scheme might operate in practice, invited views on a number of initial impact assessments that we had carried out, and asked about the factors that should be taken into account by the Department if it was designing a levy. We received 293 responses to the consultation. Of these responses, 91 were from individuals and 202 were from organisations. 164 responses were received on the Citizen Space online survey. 102 written responses followed a standardised template, were received by email, and 27 written responses not following the template were received. The first question, which was whether a pathway for introducing developer contributions should be introduced, was the only question that all 293 respondents answered or could be taken to have answered. 62%, or 181 of all respondents, disagreed that a pathway for developer contributions should be introduced, with 87 or 30% agreeing that a pathway should be introduced and 23 or 8% neither agreeing or disagreeing. There is a lot of additional information captured in the report, and Alison and I would welcome any questions the committee has about the responses we received to the consultation or indeed the consultation itself. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kiera. And yet again, departmental officials don't get anywhere near their 10 minutes and then leave me panicking over here as I get my questions in order and try and bluff for the rest of the members. That was excellent. Thank you very much for that. I, first of all, just want to highlight to members that on table papers at page 36, there is a clerk's memo. That's very useful. And I would encourage members maybe just to have a quick look at that as they consider questions to the officials. But I will kick off. Kiera, you mentioned the Minister's three-pronged approach, which as far as I know is, and correct me if I'm wrong on this one, is delivering more money to solve the problem of sort of wastewater. I assume that's going to Northern Ireland Water. The SUDS bill and the concept or policy intent of developer contributions. Am I okay so far?
Yes.
Okay, fine. So in terms of, if we stick with the developer contributions and the consultation here, has the department considered what level of quantum money that, if you're looking at the overall issue of trying to solve wastewater, has the department given any thought as to what quantum this particular policy intent would deliver?
So we have, and it's certainly a question that we were asked quite a lot. Because this was a high-level consultation, and because it was a consultation which was geared at looking at a couple of different options. One was a compulsory levy and one was voluntary. It's not very really possible for us to say how much that would result in additional funding coming to Northern Ireland Water. We have been very clear, the Minister has been very, very clear from the outset, and it was actually repeated several times within the consultation document. This is not a big money producing initiative. This is about bridging the gap. This is about adding to the amount of money that Northern Ireland Water receive that is targeted specifically towards wastewater. So if you think about voluntary contributions, and we did mention this in the consultation, infrastructure upgrades, which is what we're talking about, so Northern Ireland Water infrastructure upgrades, cost anything from 500,000 to 10 million to 200 million. It is highly unlikely that any Northern Ireland developer would have the ability to contribute to the higher end of those numbers. And if they did so, the resulting cost would just not be economically viable. But they might be able to contribute towards the lower end of that. And that is the quantum that we're talking about. When we moved to look at a compulsory levy, we were careful to steer away from any suggestion of what that might look like, because we were concerned that if we were to put an arbitrary figure on it for the sake of a calculation, that it would skew perception and people would fixate on that when we would have no basis for calculating that amount. But if you were to take a random figure, so say 5,000 houses are built every year, roughly as an estimate perhaps, and you were to add a £5,000 levy to that, that would be 25 million. If you were to add it, and it would move from there, so 6,000 would create. But because we have no basis for what that levy might look like, and we were asking people how we should calculate the levy. So one of the suggestions that we had put and that we had got some responses with was similar to what is done in England with the infrastructure levy, which would be based on square metres. So if you were to do a square metre charge, then that would result in a different amount. So that really is, okay. It's a long-winded way of saying we thought about it, but we don't really know.
Okay. No, that's useful. I'm not going to, it's difficult to put a figure on those things. I think you've done the best you can in terms of even giving us that and matchbook calculation there of 5,000 times 5,000 is useful. Although clearly that's just a figure that you picked. I'm not going to suggest that's the figure that DFI have considered. I suppose my concern around some of this, I have maybe a range of thoughts, but certainly in terms of if the department took this forward, my concern would be if developers, either through voluntary or sort of enforced contributions, were asked to let's take the 5,000 figure as a sort of a slightly arbitrary one. If they were asked and they were building 5 houses and say the figure was 25,000 across those 5, are the department not concerned that if that levy was imposed on developers, surely the developers would simply impose that onto the price of a house, and that we would see a level of house price inflation? It wouldn't be something I would imagine that the developers will take on themselves, and so what you'll find is that the infrastructure might be slightly better, but the houses would be slightly more expensive. Would you see that as a possible consequence of either of these?
So we did actually raise that in the consultation document itself, and we did make it clear that there were potentially impacts on the price of a house. The developer would have to make a financial viability assessment when they purchased land, when they looked at building houses, as to how viable that would be, and taking into account a levy or taking into account any voluntary contribution, if indeed we do move down the pathway of developer contributions. It certainly would be a scenario where they may choose to pass on the increase to the price of a house. The calculation really, I suppose, is it better to pay extra or have none? And that's the scenario where if a developer is faced with a situation where at the minute they cannot connect houses, there is no capacity in the area in which the land that they own in which they wish to develop, they are waiting for sufficient funding to be made available for that wastewater infrastructure to be upgraded to enable them to build the houses. And there are limited solutions they can put in place currently under the system they have, but if they are not available to them, then they are basically not they don't have the ability to build the houses that connect. And so putting in place a pathway for voluntary contributions would at least enable them to see movement, to enable them to build the houses and to sell the houses. And a compulsory levy would, with less direct impact, because that's the issue with the compulsory levy, is that it is a pool based on need, as opposed to directly allowing a developer to contribute towards specifically unlocking their houses. But yes, in essence, and as we made it clear in the consultation and we asked people's views on, that would in most likelihood increase the cost of a house.
Yeah. And in terms, just final question from me, in terms of the level of risk of that house price inflation, so let's say this was adopted in some shape or form, and I realise it's just a consultation document at this point in time, but if it was adopted, and you mentioned in your answer there about the fact that it could, it could lead to house price rise. What level of risk or certainty would you attach to that? In my mind, I suppose the reason for answering that question is that if some sort of charge is the key to unlocking house building, which is what we want to see, because the more houses you build, then you stabilise the cost of them. So we do want to build houses in Northern Ireland. But surely a developer will have to take on this charge and will surely just pass it on to the house buyers, or what level of risk do you see in terms of house price inflation if this was adopted?
I would say that developers would have to do a financial viability assessment, and we had been clear in the consultation that there were consequences to that, and high value houses might be more likely to be almost fast-tracked through a system if there were voluntary contributions put in place, because they could afford to absorb or pass on the price of a house. A house maybe would rise in price from 350,000 to 360,000. That's not a figure to take it as face value, but perhaps if they were building a development of 500 houses, they might see that is something that they could absorb, factor into their financial calculations, or they could assess that the market is capable of absorbing that extra amount. And those are all things that we had drawn out in the consultation document, had raised as potential issues. there isn't really a scenario where we can look at a developer contributing to houses and not have that impact on house prices. That is a natural consequence of a policy to introduce developer contributions.
No, that's pretty clear. Thank you for that, Kiera. John?
Thank you, Chair. Thanks very much for coming along today, for the answers, and for the really good document. I think it's really helpful. I know this is still in the conceptual stage, so it's hard to get into too much detail. But there's obviously significant concern if we look at question 1 regarding the responses over this. Over 60%, I think we said, were opposed to it in some shape or form. How will that potentially affect the department's thought process going forward, and maybe changes to that?
So the Minister will take into account all evidence and all information in front of her. So consultation responses are valuable. They provide valuable insights and valuable input. And as you say, 60% of those who responded to the consultation did not approve of the introduction of developer contributions. The Minister will look at it in the round in the case of the benefits, the whole sustainability issue, the level of funding, the economic situation. And she will take account of all of those factors when she makes a decision. So the consultation, whilst important, would not, in any consultation, is not a determining factor alone. It is for the Minister to make a decision based on the information that she has available to her, and it certainly adds valuable information to her decision-making process, but it is for her to decide.
Okay. Would you be able to go into more detail on the responses of those who did respond, particularly that first question? And I think particularly we talked about developers potentially passing this on. Well, they will pass it on to the homeowner, whoever purchased the house, and that will be at the higher end. But I'm particularly interested to hear maybe what housing associations and those wanting to build what we are lacking distinctly in Northern Ireland, which is social and affordable homes, how this will impact that, and the ability of those associations, who for some cash is quite tight, to avail of this and to actually build the homes that we need. Was there any more detail on that?
So we did receive a variety of responses from a lot of organisations. That included Northern Ireland Water, the Construction Employers Federation, the Federation of Housing Associations, Build Homes NI, the Housing Executive, political parties, professional bodies, developers, planning consultants, the 6 local councils, and there were a variety of perspectives. For those who were opposed to the introduction, there were pretty consistent in terms of their reasoning, that they thought that it would impact on housing availability, that they thought that there were, in the main, people who responded thought something had to be done. There had to be more money provided to wastewater, that was necessary in order to enable houses to be built and for houses to connect to the wastewater system. So they were clear that something should be done. They weren't sure that developer contributions were it. And they came up with a variety of suggestions as to alternatives, and a lot of people were asking for longer term plans or longer term considerations. Specifically around social housing, a lot of people did raise that as a potential issue. Others raised it as something that would have to be factored into any form of a relief scheme or any form of an exception scheme, and as a policy would be developed if the Minister was minded to move down a route of either voluntary or compulsory levy, consideration would have to be given to how social housing could be still be enabled. So if you look at it from the perspective of a voluntary contribution, a social housing builder would probably be less likely to want to contribute towards a system or have less flexibility in terms of funding in order to make that happen, which brings us back to the whole fast tracking argument. But if someone is releasing capacity elsewhere and is paying for that, there is therefore more money available to address other areas of greater need, which would include for social housing. And as we put in relation to a compulsory levy, if that was the option that the Minister chose, there would be a consideration given to and a need to develop any exemptions or any reductions or a sliding scale when it came to social housing. So certainly at this early stage, it was something that we had flagged as something that was an issue, but that would and for example, the Housing Executive were supportive of some form of developer contributions.
there has been, for quite a significant period of time, though, a relationship between NI Water and developers who have been using developer charges to try and unlock some of the capacity issues. So to that end, what is different about the concept or proposals that would exist and the informal relationship that has happened? And from what I can see anecdotally, where that's happened, it's in the very expensive houses where they can afford to absorb it and pass it on at a £5,000 or £6,000 or £7,000 increase to the potential buyer. So what would be different in this versus the informal representation that's been going on? And secondly, in areas where it's totally constrained, how would it be, for example, in Larne, where there's zero capacity, so there are massive amount of houses held up? How would the process work to unlock it in that area, if that makes sense?
So in relation to your first question, there is a difference between what is currently done. So what is currently done by, which are developer-led solutions, is currently permissible under legislation. And that is where a developer will pay for and install their own wastewater infrastructure. So for example, bigger pipes, flow solutions or packaged wastewater treatment plants. What the department consulted on was whether in principle it should be possible for Northern Ireland Water to accept contributions from developers for improvements which involve upgrading or replacing Northern Ireland Water wastewater assets. So that's the difference, and currently there is a bar legislatively to Northern Ireland Water accepting those payments. So that would be the difference. In terms of how it would impact on it, what the way that we would envisage it, if we were to take, for example, voluntary contributions as an example. A developer would have a plot of land and they would want to develop, say, 500 houses. They would go to Northern Ireland Water and ask what the potential was to connect it to the wastewater systems. And if Northern Ireland Water says there is no capacity, then that developer might say, is there anything that I can do to help unlock capacity? And if it is a £500,000 fix or a £10 million fix, then that is one situation. If it is, we need a brand new treatment plant at a cost of 200 million, the developer is unlikely to be able to contribute 200 million to make that happen. So it's no different to how it currently is.
Yes.
When it would come to a compulsory levy would result in a pool of additional funding being available for addressing wastewater issues, and that would just happen in line with PC21 and in line with need. So it would be where the need is, and then that would just be added into the amount. It, as we've been very clear in the consultation, and the Minister has made extremely clear, this is not a silver bullet. This is not fixing wastewater constraints. It simply will not do that. It is helping to bridge the gap. It is not solving.
Okay, so in the likes, for example, in Larne, and I say it because it's my constituency area, but there are many like it, it is at total capacity. There is a total block on a constraint on any development in the area, and the estimated cost is about £130+ million to do the necessary works to increase capacity. So there's no way that this scheme, what I hear, would open up development in that area, because developers were already trying to work with NI Water and there was never a solution to be able to find to increase the capacity beyond increasing the pumping station. So it wouldn't resolve that issue. And
they would have so if the Minister was minded to go with voluntary contributions, all developers would have the ability to contribute and potentially the ability to pool together to contribute. And there would have to be a market assessment and viability assessment done by that developer as to whether the amount that they could contribute was financially viable to them, and then an assessment undertaken by Northern Ireland Water as to whether, so if, and this is all theoretical,
yeah, I appreciate
but
that.
if, say, a couple of developers were able to provide 50 million because it was going to unlock a lot of houses for them, Northern Ireland Water would therefore have to find the remainder, but wouldn't have to find the full amount. So that might enable it to be done quicker or faster, or it might not, depending on the availability of funding. But this is the voluntary contributions, and the pathway for that is simply to make it possible for that conversation to be had, whereas at the minute it cannot be had.
Okay, no, I appreciate it. I'm sorry if I'm getting beyond the conceptual stage, and I'm just sure you looked at it. The final one, Chair, then, there are tens of thousands of properties in economic development schemes that are currently locked because of lack of constraint. So has a piece of work been done to look at what could be opened up in terms of numbers from what is stuck in the pipeline versus what might come down the road if this was to get the go-ahead? presumably as part of the three-pronged approach, you'd say if we did this, this and this, we could well unlock this. Is that being done, and how would that look?
Yes, in addition to the three-pronged approach, the Department has been working with Northern Ireland Water, the Northern Ireland Executive and NIEA, and a cross-departmental working group looking at just that.
Okay.
In fact, and Northern Ireland Housing Executive also sit on that, and that is what has resulted in the unlocking of capacity that you'll have seen through the recent monitoring round allocations.
Yes.
So around about 5,000 properties or so unlocked since October 24 in relation to that. The Department also sits on the Housing Supply Strategy Group with all of the other departments and is working with DFC on an action plan. So developer contributions is very much part of that. And as part of all of that work, that looks at the houses that are in the queue, if you like, to be unlocked. It is important, though, to stress that that group is looking at projects that have requested a connection from Northern Ireland Water and have addressed all of their planning permission and all of their environmental consents. So it's only at the point when a project has got to that stage where it has planning permission, it has its environmental consents, then that the unlocking of the capacity can be looked at. We obviously can't look at, we don't know, so we don't know what's already in the planning system already and that type of thing. So obviously this is about environmental consents here is the overriding factor. So the current developer funded solutions really, and I guess the difference, and it's possibly a fine difference, is the current position with developer funded solutions is really about permitting connection of those new developments to existing infrastructure. So it's really, the developer is facilitating, if you like, the extension of Northern Ireland Water's network to the connection point of the new development. And that often includes stormwater offsetting and providing pipes and doing that sort of thing. In the main, developers want to connect to the public sewage system. And Northern Ireland Water prefer that as well. And you talked about Lauren earlier, in an area where there is no capacity, it's important then for Northern Ireland Water to establish if the blockage is in the network itself, which it can be sometimes, or if it's at a treatment works further down the line, and that then will determine the direction Northern Ireland Water take. But Northern Water have a very good system for pre-development, and they absolutely encourage developers to engage in that process as soon as they can, to try and look at all the options and to identify where the blockages are, if it's at the treatment works or if it's at the networks. This voluntary contribution and the developer's contribution, should the Minister choose to go ahead, then that's looking at the unblocking where the issue is a Northern Ireland Water asset, whether that be a water treatment work, a sewage treatment works, a pumping station, that type of thing. The existing solution is about developers providing their own infrastructure, their own funded infrastructure to connect to the existing network. I don't know if that makes it any clearer.
It absolutely does.
Sorry.
Yeah, it does. Just in terms of time frame, this will obviously get back to the Minister now. She will take soundings from yourselves and from the consultation. Do you have a rough anticipated time frame of when we hear something next regarding this?
So it will depend on the Minister, but I would anticipate within the coming weeks.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Chair. Appreciate it.
Thanks, John. I just had one little question, just following on from what John said there, and I think on the way through there, Kiera, you mentioned about the treatment plants and they were quite expensive and so forth. I suppose my question was around that. So, say a developer said they identified actually a small treatment plant might be helpful and might unlock a development of whatever it is, 50 or 100 houses, but it was identified that actually this treatment plant would be the key to that and would solve that problem. Is it the case that the developer would build that treatment works themselves at NIW standards, or would they say to Northern Ireland Water, here's the money, you go build the treatment works, is the first one?
So Northern Ireland Water have a very strong preference for building themselves because
imagine,
they
yes.
don't want to take any risks of taking on anyone else's building quality. So the anticipation and the bit that we are looking to unlock legislatively, if this was to be put forward, would be to enable the developer to transfer the money to Northern Ireland Water, and Northern Ireland Water to then use their own staff and contractors to build it to their specifications.
Okay. And then Northern Ireland Water, that would probably get over the hurdle of who runs it, which I'd imagine would be a rather controversial one going forward. So effectively, it's because I did see some answers in question 5 just regarding upgrade cost calculations should reflect market costs, not be based on higher NIW procurement network costs. That notwithstanding, essentially what you're saying is Northern Ireland Water's preference is that some money is given to them in whatever format, and they go and do the necessary work and they build it and then they run it and so forth. Okay, that's fine. Thank you very much for that. Stephen.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, folks, for the presentation and the work done so far. There's quite a negative response, I think it's fair to say, in terms of consultation. There was a real general feeling that the department isn't going far enough on what is such a major fundamental issue, that it is causing a severe impact on home building and much more beyond, I suppose. So I suppose the question I ask, was it a surprise to the department how negative the responses were?
So I don't know that we had any perception. I don't think the Minister had any concept of how it was going to be viewed. We had certainly been, so Northern Ireland Water are in regular contact with developers, and some developers had been asking them for the ability to at least look at some sort of voluntary contribution. And so the idea was that we would test the waters. We would ask people what they thought in a way that enabled us to gauge the level of interest and the level of support. And that's why we consulted. So I wouldn't say that we went into it with an expectation of an overwhelming level of support or otherwise. It was a genuine temperature gauge.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, there was a reasonable, certainly, level of interest in it and responses, you know, and I think it was fairly negative. I think it's fair to say when over 60% disagree with, you know, the main theme of the contributions. One other issue around within the written responses was mentioned about it going beyond home building. Where is that in terms of, because obviously the capacity issues, you know, don't just affect domestic homes, they affect commercial premises and so on. So is that going to be included going forward in any way, do you envisage at this stage?
Yeah, so I would think that coming back to the Minister deciding, if she may decide that developers' contributions are not something that should be put in place. If she moves down the road of either unlocking voluntary contributions or unlocking compulsory, I think certainly that would be part of the policy design process, is adding that into the conversations.
You know, on the domestic homes?
I would say it would make sense to look at.
Maybe if I could just add, so any work at all to unlock capacity obviously provides capacity in the network and potentially at the treatment works, so that will allow any type of development to connect, so whether that be social housing, private housing, industry or anything, so that it's unlocking the capacity is the key, but it could facilitate more than housing. It's about unlocking capacity for all types of wastewater connections.
I suppose to re-echo the points made by Chair and Vice Chair, you know, around that issue, around affordability, and we've talked about that now for over a year, I'm sure, within the committee, about the impact that it will have on consumers. The other just final question was around other jurisdictions and any lessons learned. Has there been any, you know, good practice or bad practice that you've, you know, explored with this process so far? Yeah,
so it's actually quite difficult to draw comparisons elsewhere because the funding model in Northern Ireland is so different.
I appreciate that,
so there are other areas where some form of levy or amount of developer contributions is accepted. So in England and Wales, for example, there is the Community Infrastructure Levy, which allows for local authorities to set a charge for developers. The difference again is that local authorities have a much wider remit in England and Wales than we do here, so that would include the likes of wastewater and water in many circumstances. But in the main, improvements to wastewater infrastructure is made through water bills, is covered by water bills. And so we did look at it and we did do a piece of benchmarking work, but there is because of such massive difference in how we operate, there wasn't really a natural one that we could say we could take that.
Yeah, no, appreciate that.
Okay. Maybe if I could just add, I don't know if you saw last week in the media, there was some coverage from the Republic of Ireland where developers of housing units down there are potentially going to be allowed to build their own infrastructure instead of having to wait for Uisce Éireann to do so under measures. So the Cabinet, their Housing Minister, is bringing forward proposals to the Cabinet down there, so we're obviously keeping a watching brief on that.
Yes, okay. Thanks, folks. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Stephen. Andrew.
Thank you, Chair. Just going back to the responses and the consultation, we sort of touched on it a wee bit before, but is there any indication or correlation between the agree, disagree? I mean, did you find that one particular sector was more inclined to go with the agree or disagree, or what was your findings out of that?
I don't know that we discovered that there was any particular any particular weighting one way or the other. I mean, that we were looking mainly at the results. I don't know that we particularly focused on who said yes and who said no, if that makes sense. So I don't know that I could answer that in terms of an analysis of which pockets of respondents responded in certain ways.
Okay. Just the next sort of, I suppose really what I'm, because a lot of good points have been made, but I'm sort of drawn back to sort of what you said in your opening statement about this is the minister's going to consider this and all the rest of it, and I'm sort of in my head, the adage advisors advise and ministers decide. And I suppose really my question is, what are the advisors going to advise on this now? You know what I mean? Given the strength of opinion against it, and given the intricacies with it, given that it's only a gap, if you will, that's sort of, I mean, so what will the advisors be advising?
So it is, as you say, for the minister to decide on what action to take following a consultation. She has received the same report that the committee has. And she will be making her decision in the coming days. But I am obviously happy to reflect back to her in making that decision, any particular comments that the committee has.
Okay. That's fine, Chair, yeah.
Thanks, Andrew. Cathal.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you very much for the presentation. Obviously, most of the points have been covered. Quite an interesting conversation, and that's why we would go out to consultations as part of a three-pronged approach. And if you had asked any of us some of the responses they got in terms of the cost come back to the consumer, they would have popped up anyway. That's the first thing would have been said. So and it's a wee bit touched on Andrew, because you've answered most of the questions already. I mean, obviously you haven't the time to do a full analysis because affordability is an issue as well, right? And it's going to be market led. It's going to be increases, and we still have that anyway. We still have the affordability in market. In terms of that, but what I'm trying to get at is it's interesting here. There was people responding who are just totally opposed to it, one way or another. So, and you haven't obviously done an analysis for that. Clearly, you haven't broke it down. But there's a lot of good points here in terms of, and it's easy to read it clearly. And for most of the people who respond out there, it's a negative response. But there's learnings in it as well. So from that point of view, in terms of and some of the questions there's people 19%, 30%, some of the questions who would be in favour. Is there anything coming out of that? Because, and I asked it in the context of this, we're looking at a three-pronged approach, and listen to what John said about if there's an area to be developed, there's a good opportunity there to maybe develop Larne if there's a contribution made whatsoever. Like we're saying now at the minute, there is a developer-led process, but in this case, if there was something to be introduced, they might unlock that potential to develop that. So my question is, in terms of some of the maybe the positive responses to people who come, have you done an analysis of that, or is there any ideas coming out of that? Yeah.
So what was basically what happened was that if and what made this actually quite a challenging consultation to do a consultation responses on was the number of people who answered other, and the other was we don't want it, or a variety of reasons why they didn't want things. So if you look at the consultation responses, you'll see the question was, if we were to introduce it, would you prefer voluntary contributions? And the answer in the main was other, and the other was we don't want voluntary contributions. Or for a variety of reasons, this is not our preferred approach. When it came to those who answered yes to, and as you would expect, when they answered that they did want, either that they wanted developer contributions to be introduced, or that they neither agreed nor disagreed, and that they could see the value, but I weren't prepared to say either way, that those people were more likely to then come up with suggestions. So if they were talking about the compulsory levy, they were more likely to suggest how we would put that in place or how we would calculate it. And there was a variety of responses, from using a sliding scale to calculate it on square metre footage. And yeah, so there was certainly a lot of of positives with the people that wanted some form of developer contributions to be introduced. They focused on unlocking capacity, on making it, on increasing housing, on addressing the issues of housing and using developers' contributions as a way to make that happen. So there were certainly positive responses that gave us suggestions about how we could take the developers' contributions forward.
Just to find Chris, I don't know, I should know this, but I'm going to see the citizen space responses. I take it it's not only just for, there's people responded on citizen space in relation to groups. Is that right? Yeah, as opposed to just individual. Yeah.
So we had individuals and groups. So there are a series of questions which are, you know, are you responding as an individual, or are you responding as part of an organisation? And there was some questions around whether you were an organisation, whether you were happy to be identified. We don't identify individuals when we outline who responded to a consultation, but we do identify organisations. So there was a little bit about that. What was interesting is that with the responses that we did receive, and I think I touched on this in my opening remarks, that of the responses that we got, 102, which was just over a third of all the responses, were the template response. So they didn't answer on citizen space, they didn't answer the questions, which is why we say that the first question was really the question that all 293 answered. They had a templated response where they completed the name of their organisation or their name, and then they sent it to our email address, our consultation email address, and that in essence just described why they didn't want developer contributions and said that they were opposed to it. So it didn't then go into any conversation around voluntary or compulsory. So that almost a third of the replies that we received were the ones that didn't answer the rest of the questions, if that makes sense.
Okay, thanks, Chair. Thank you very much.
That's great. Thank you very much, Cahill. Harry.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I think all the questions or concerns are along the same sort of themes. What really stood out to me was 14% strongly agree, while 58% disagree. And I think a concerning thing with me, for myself, would be that there was a comment made that this would not be a determinant factor. So you kind of wonder, was the process worthwhile if it's not going to be a determinant factor? But just thinking on the respondees, and I think Cahill sort of touched on it, we don't know the background of the respondees, really. Sure, we don't. Whether they're from a developer background.
So we have a list of all the organisations that responded. What we didn't do in the consultation responses report, because we didn't start working out what interest they had, if that makes sense. So we didn't look at it from the perspective of, well, you would put the housing executive in this box, you would put the Construction Federation in this box, you would put Better Homes NI in this box. We didn't do it like that. We have a list of all of the organisations that responded. I can tell you who responded, but we didn't break down by sector, because we would have had to do a piece of work with those 293 names to try and identify them into boxes or areas. We didn't do that. Yeah.
That's okay. Yeah. Okay.
And on the consultation point, consultation is valuable and important, and it enables us to gather data. It is, when I say it's not the determining factor, it's because ministers have to look at the wide range of issues. So if I was to give an example of when we go out to consult on raising fares, or when you go out to consult on introducing a new tax, or when you go out to consult on any of those things, the views of people help to inform the decision, but they're not the only thing that need to be considered by a minister when making a determination.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Harry. Justin.
Sure, thank you, Kiera and Alison, for your evidence. Very interesting discussion. In terms of the much lauded three-pronged approach, which is going to be the cure to all the ills of the Department for Infrastructure in terms of a water and drainage perspective, give me your take on them, please.
In what developers.
Well, just give me what the three-pronged approach is. What it actually involves. What are the three prongs? And if you had a stool built of these three legs or three prongs, which would be the most secure leg? Tell me, what is the three-pronged approach?
Good Presbyterian strategy there, Justin, the three-pronged approach. Sorry, Alison, you were about to either indulge in theology or explain the three-pronged approach. Apologies.
I was just going to explain the three-pronged approach.
You're very welcome to go into the theology as well if you want to, but as Presbyterian...
Right, Alison, we'll give that a wee bit of a miss today.
Sorry, Alison.
The Minister has articulated her three-pronged approach quite a lot in the Chamber and in other places. So the three elements of the three-pronged approach are to continue to press the Executive for adequate funding for Northern Ireland Water, to bring forward the Water, Flooding and Sustainable Drainage Bill, which is with the Committee at the moment, and developer contributions.
Okay, I'm looking at the three prongs here. I'm trying to figure out in my head if I was seeking certainty around delivery. Three-pronged approach wouldn't give me much certainty. I'm looking at funding and partnership, I'm looking at individual solutions, I'm looking at legislation, and none of them or three are certain. So I'm just concerned about that. I know you're not answerable to that, but I am concerned about that. Are developer contributions not already happening organically?
So, as we were sort of making that point when I was answering the question around the difference between what currently happens, yes, developers are actively engaging with Northern Ireland Water around how they can help or what they can do to unlock their ability to connect their houses. So they are actively working with Northern Ireland Water. The issue is that there are limits within the legislation as to how far that can go. Mm-hmm. So as Alison and I were mentioning earlier, there are things such as stormwater offsetting, which can free capacity within the wastewater network by removing stormwater. There are flow transfer schemes, which are used to divert flows from drainage areas which have reached capacity to another wastewater network area where capacity exists. They can purchase and construct standalone package wastewater treatment plants, which is not a preferred option, but it's an option. Those are all things that developers may currently do and currently do and heavily engage with Northern Ireland Water to do. This is the us unblocking or the proposal for either voluntary contributions or compulsory levy, if that is how the Minister wishes to go. Both of them would need us to unlock the legislation which blocks that from happening, to put in place a power which enables Northern Ireland Water to accept funding to fix its own wastewater infrastructure.
Has an assessment been done in terms of the economic impact of the blockage to development that's currently in place in situ that's stopping development? Has an assessment been done of the cost to the economy by not being able to advance development on multiple sites across the north because of wastewater capacity? So
we know Northern Ireland Water publish the constrained areas. So we know which areas have constraints. I don't know that we have followed that through with any form of economic assessment per se, but we certainly know where the constrained areas are, and we know that there are developers within those areas who would like to build.
No drains, no cranes, as I've said in here a number of times, and developers are screaming and crying out for progress on this front. I'm back to the three prongs. There's no certainty on any of the prongs, so that must be a concern for them and for your department, I would imagine. In terms of responses, from who have you received responses? I mean, can you say that the vast majority of your responses were from developers, or the vast majority of responses were from potential residents or householders? Is there a breakdown of what?
So I can certainly provide a list of the organisations that replied. As I say, we don't publish for privacy reasons. We tend not, in GDPR reasons, we don't tend to publish the names of individuals who responded. We can say X amount of individuals responded, which I had previously alluded to. We can provide a list of the organisations, certainly, who responded to the consultation.
Timeframes wise, and I guess back to, if I'm a developer, I'm sitting today with a big landmass with zoning on it, but no access to water treatment, and I'm looking at this committee and I'm saying, oh, we're ready to go now, it's all sorted now. No. So my point is, timeframes wise, what is a realistic timeframe for unlocking of access to our water wastewater treatment systems?
So in terms of developer contributions, the first decision is whether the Minister wishes to proceed. So again, looking at whether or not she wants to proceed with moving forward on developer contributions. Then it's what pathway, if she so decides, she wishes to recommend. If it is a compulsory levy, a compulsory contribution as opposed to a compulsory levy. Compulsory levy would be the longest to put in place. Voluntary contributions would be quicker, but would still take time. It would require primary legislation, and the committee will be aware of the legislative capacity of the committee and of the Assembly, and that is something that we would have to work with them on. And we also then would need to do the more detailed policy work in terms of how it would apply, when it would be available, at what point of the process you could apply it. All of those further detailed policy work would need to take place. It would be a parallel approach. So we would be preparing legislation at the same time as we were preparing any policy position and policy. In essence, more procedures and practice and guidance, and working closely with Northern Ireland Water and developers as that was developed. So there would be a gap in terms of how long that would take. It is probably constrained more by the legislative timetable than it is constrained by the ability for us to develop practices and procedures and do a further consultation.
So don't hold your breath for the three-pronged approach to deliver. In terms of the LTV, the loan-to-value of mortgages and home buyers' ability to fund their purchase given improvements may not be securable against the asset of the building. Has there been any consideration been given to that?
At this point, no, that would be something that I think that would come in, as we talked earlier about the economic viability and we talked about the economic consequences. All of that as we were narrowing in on what this looks like in practice. If, again, the Minister chooses to take that route, those would be the sort of situations where that would take place. And I think it would look different under a compulsory levy than it would look under a potential voluntary contribution.
Obviously, at different locations across the north, the level of intervention required is hugely varied, and would the approach be around equalising of levies potentially across the north, regardless of where the issues are for individual sites?
On a compulsory, the compulsory levy, if it were put in place, and one of the options I should have reminded members of is that there was also an option for both compulsory and voluntary to be put in place at the same time. The compulsory levy would take away that issue of fairness in terms of who could afford to contribute in order to unlock wastewater capacity, because it would be a blanket. But that blanket would have to, and that's partly why a compulsory levy would take longer to develop, because there would have to be consideration given to, for example, whether if you are living in a rural area where you have a septic tank, should you be expected to pay a compulsory levy towards wastewater capacity when you were never going to connect to wastewater in the first place? And so there are levels of relief schemes or exemptions that would have to be worked through, consulted upon and considered. So in answer to your question, there would have to be consideration given to a reduction or a weighting of in those situations.
Potentially a tiered approach.
Potentially, but again, that would be part of the policy development and procedural development if the Minister chooses to take that route.
Last question, Chair. Thank you. In terms of benchmarking, you have said you're making comparisons with what's happening in the south. Has the Minister, in terms of taking an All-Ireland approach, has the Minister corresponded with her equivalent in the south to see what the approach they're adopting there and what might be implemented here, which is singing from the same hymn sheet, so to speak?
Not that I'm aware of.
As it stands, I don't know that she has engaged with her counterpart in the south on that issue. We would have to check.
Thank you, Justin. I'm going to bring Andrea in in a wee second. There's just one question I had that should have led out of just the chat that you had with Justin there, and it was around, and still staying with the Presbyterian theme of your answer, Kiera, around what is being done currently as a a sort of bridging gap to free up development. And I think, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think you said they're separating out storm water, which is important from the normal sewage, using other additional capacity where one was, I guess, being used up, but there was additional capacity elsewhere. And the third one was in terms of treatment works and putting those in place. Could I ask, are all those three things currently being done? Okay. So I want to focus on that last one there, just around treatment works. And so if those are being put in at the minute, your previous answer was around that Northern Ireland Water were very keen that they do that and they're procured in that way. Is that happening, or can you tell me if that sort of treatment work's going in? So who's putting it in, who's paying for it, and who's running it?
So I'm going to put
Yes, sure.
Alison on this one. We're now technical, and engineer Alison is going to answer.
Right.
That would occasionally be part of a developer-funded solution where if there was absolutely no connection available or likely to be available in the very near future, a developer could choose to put in a package waste treatment works. So it's a very small thing just to service that development of however many houses was there. The developer would then be responsible for maintaining that until such times as Northern Ireland Water could adopt it. However, the decision maker in terms of whether or not there could be a package plant put on that site is actually the NIEA, because the package plant in itself would have to obtain an environmental discharge consent in order to be a viable option. And that often, for package plants, that can be difficult. You then run into the risk of, should it get its environmental discharge consent and be connected in the houses or occupied, there have been occasions in the past where then developers have gone out of business and have gone bust, and no one is left to administer those package plants. So while it is a prong of currently developer-funded solutions, the preference would always be to connect to the public sewage system.
Okay. That's very interesting, Alison. I'll ask you one more question around that, because your answer was very interesting, and you nearly saw where I was going with this. So let's say one of these is currently in place, or will be in place before any of this stuff works itself out. Okay, so these things can happen. I suppose my question was, well, let me restate what you said. It's built by, in this case, currently it's built by the developer, and at some point, people cross their fingers and hope that Northern Ireland Water will adopt, right? Let's say Northern Ireland Water aren't overly happy with the treatment plant, and say, look, no, we're not going to adopt that. It has to be this standard. And then the developer goes out of business, and the whole thing starts unraveling in terms of NIA and overspills, and I don't know what all the technical terms are, but the plant just isn't coping. I mean, who's liable for that? I suppose you can see where I'm driving towards.
Yep.
Is it the 50 people who bought a house in that development and they go, why is there sewage coming up my drain or whatever? Are they ultimately liable in that situation I've described, or does Northern Ireland Water step in?
Yes,
there?
they are. Where it's a private development and it's private.
Yep.
In this case, it would be with a package wastewater treatment. Where it's private, the residents would be responsible for that. Northern Ireland Water are only responsible for it when it's been fully adopted under the Article 161 situation.
And if it's currently happening, would householders be made aware of that as they perhaps plan to buy their house? Because I think that it sounds quite serious in terms of ultimately if the scheme of events that I've described to you happened, would they be made aware of that at the time of purchase of their house?
Well, their legal representatives should make them aware of that at the time.
Yeah.
If they don't, it's liable to come to light maybe at a later stage if they were maybe to sell their house or whatever. But the duty there is on the householder to carry out due diligence in relation to the legal advice that they're receiving at the time they're buying the house.
Okay. That's great. No, thank you for that, Alison. Andrew?
Thank you, Chair. I'm trying not to get distracted by Presbyterians in 1798 and firmly bite my tongue here now, so I am, you know what I mean?
I've opened up a theme here, Andrew. I do apologise.
I do want to come back, with great respect, I do want to come back to this consultation response and not breaking it down by sectors. I'm going to break my own rules here, Chair. I don't like to sort of extrapolate too much before I ask the question, but the question is, why is it not breaking down by sectors? And the reason I ask is, with the greatest respect, the Minister comes, and she's very good at coming in the chamber, and we'll ask about a range of issues. You know, might ask about the environment, might ask about wastewater, we might ask about SORP, we might ask about farmers, we might ask about social housing. And a lot of this will come back to the three-pronged approach, of which the developer contributions factors in, okay? I just, you know, I think I need to know, and I appreciate you've said that there's a list of all the respondees and all the rest of it. I appreciate you don't necessarily want to give individual responses from individual, but in my head, surely there must be, in this day and age, you know, we get presentations and we get themes and we get graphs and pie charts, and I can't get my head around why it hasn't been broken down into some sort of very rudimentary sectoral response. Because ultimately, if you know, again, just rough numbers here, 30%. If 30% of planners, for example, or that, you know, well, yes, they're going to say we're happy to have developer contributions because we get the houses built X, Y, Z. But likewise, if there's a large cohort of people that are invested in social housing are saying, well, actually, this isn't going to affect. So, I mean, that's not going to then lead to the resolution of a key issue within this executive. Likewise, if there's an environmental sector saying this developer contribution is not going to affect the environmental issues that this executive is facing. So, I mean, that's just, I suppose, why was it not, and can it be, and would it help? And again, we're going back to the last other questions about advising the Minister. You know, surely breaking those sectoral things would help. I mean, I appreciate you're not going to tell me what you're going to advise the Minister, but I just for the Minister's benefit, would it not help? I'm sorry, I do appreciate all the answers you've given. But the other thing as well is a lot of these answers that are given are very hypothetical. Like, we're literally pulling out, well, if a whole pile of developers club together for 50 million, and that's £5,000 per house, you know, what X amount of houses being built. And so I do get all this, but again, I'm just left wondering why it wasn't.
So part of the problem is the complexity of the responses. So we got 202 that were declared to be from organisations. So sometimes that's someone saying, I represent an organisation, but not telling us the organisation name. Sometimes that is people filling in the citizen space. Sometimes we received a response on citizen space and we received an additional response on an email, and we're able to correlate those together. A lot of the responses didn't answer the questions, and without you know, sometimes it was we're not answering your questions, we're just going to tell you what we think, and then you're trying to extrapolate from a 10, 15, 20 page document, key indicators, key themes, and whether they are saying yes or no. And so and as I said before, the only question that 293 responses, and it wasn't as clear as we oppose, we support. It was read this document, and buried in it is a line which makes it clear that we don't think that we don't want this. And so it becomes quite complex from that perspective to break it down in terms of how organisations responded and what that meant. So how many organisations responded to the first question and not the second? As I said, the people who responded with that template response didn't respond to any other questions. They gave us a templated response that we've covered in the consultation responses report, that outlined all of the issues that they felt, and it were clear that we have represented what they were telling us in terms of the advice, in terms of what they thought about the concepts of developer contributions. But it's difficult to then assign it through in a way that makes sense, and it risks being misleading. And as I was saying earlier, we also then are faced with a scenario where someone says they're from an organisation, but we don't know, but they've sent an email address, and the email address looks like it might be this organisation, and therefore how are you putting that through, and what does that look like? So it was a very complex consultation to analyse, and that's why it was. And I understand what you were saying, and perhaps frustration around how high level this was. It is a high level consultation because the options are so diverse, so none, in which case no further work is going to be done on this. Voluntary, which moves us down a completely different path, or compulsory, which moves us down a different path altogether. And the detail of the work and the detailed assessments and the answers to the questions you're looking for, we're not going to spend very limited resources that we have working out what a compulsory levy might look like, how much it would be, what it would be calculated, how all of that happens if the ultimate decision is we're not going to take that path. So to spend the next, for talk's sake, year going into developing really detailed proposals for all of the potential options to enable us to consult again on all of that wouldn't necessarily be the best use of time. So this was around a narrowing consultation. This was, in principle, how do you feel about this? And in principle, what about these? Which of these pathways would you like to see? And then we narrow that down with the Minister saying, okay, I have taken in the responses, I have listened to all of the evidence, and I have now decided that I would like to explore this path, whether it is none, whether it is voluntary, and whether it is compulsory. If she chooses, for example, if she chose to go down the route of voluntary, then our policy and procedural work is focused in on what that looks like, how we would put it in place, working with the utility regulator around some of the issues there, working with Northern Ireland Water, using their links with developers, consulting further, developing a bill, coming back to the committee, doing all of the consultation on that. There will be more detailed consultation on procedures and guidance, which gives it a very clear set out about how that operates in practice. Similarly, on a compulsory levy would be the same thing, a very detailed policy, procedure, guidance that enables you to have all of your questions answered because they're all in there, but they're at a lower level, they're at that detailed, focused level, which is not where we currently are.
Quite a detailed answer there, Andrew. Are you?
Well, I mean,
have you got one more question?
I don't have a laser focused Keith Buchanan question, so I'll leave it at that. Right. Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Okay, Cathal.
Just quickly, Chair, because it's interesting. You brought up the issue of building SPAC tanks. I call them SPAC because they're specified. I mean, you fill in the Article 161, and I mean, it's interesting having that conversation because, say, they signed off or it's not. You know what I mean? Obviously, the ultimate thing probably is that NIW as a company, they would like to do them from the start, but they clear them. I mean, in terms of they have to adhere to that 161. Right or wrong?
Yes, you mean for package plans?
Yes.
Yes, so the package plan first has to meet a discharge consent and has to achieve a discharge consent from NIEA. Should receive that discharge consent and be operational, then yes, the developer can enter into an Article 161 agreement with Northern Ireland Water, which would eventually lead to adoption. But that would be a decision for Northern Ireland Water.
No, absolutely, Chair. No, it's funny. It's been raised a number of occasions.
Right.
But that they're all part of the process, and you know, it's just one of those things that's come up in part of the conversation. But it should be. But and it's just what you raised. I can't understand the major issue with it. But it is an issue, obviously, from NIW's point of view. But
okay, Justin. Yeah, final one.
Those package plants are notoriously problematic, and I know that we are most likely opposed to their implementation and adoption because developers install them, not to spec, developers out of business, 5 housing points past where the batch treatment plants can't access, they're getting storage treatment doesn't work, the developer's gone boom, and who's responsible? And that has just left out those families totally distraught with a smell, obnoxious smell outside their home from a batch treatment plant that doesn't work, and nobody's taking responsibility. What do you do then?
Yeah, and there are examples of that, but plants that aren't adopted remain as private infrastructure and are the responsibility of the residents.
exactly. That's the point.
Okay. Ladies, thank you very much for coming to committee and giving evidence this morning, not only on the consultation, but on the Minister's three-pronged approach, Presbyterianism and the 1798 rebellion. So, look, I do appreciate you coming. That was a very thorough session, and I hope the committee is setting a benchmark for proper scrutiny, but respectful scrutiny of all the officials that come before it. So we really appreciate that evidence this morning, and thank you very much for coming along.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, folks. In terms of actions from the evidence that was provided by Alison and Kiera, does anyone have anything specific? It was quite a detailed session and fairly wide-ranging. Anything anyone wants to highlight before I go to Michael and ask if there's anything that he picked up on the way through? Andrew, you're getting ready to say something here?
I appreciate the consultation, but I just don't see how further forward we are in understanding how these will affect, just how much of a contribution the developer contributions are going to make in this in solving this problem.
Yeah.
And I do feel, and I mean, long-standing members of this committee, I don't try not to get frustrated, but I do feel slightly frustrated at this because, again, to be told on one hand it's a high-level consultation, but then not have areas and solutions and how this is going to. I don't know. It didn't marry up in my head, Chair. To be fair, and I'm sorry about that, but yeah, that's where I'm at.
Well, look, the committee can follow that up. I mean, I think it goes to the first question I think I asked, which I was sort of trying to tease out with officials what size of prong this was in the minister's strategy in terms of a quantum. Now, to be probably fair to the officials, I mean, there's probably a reason they didn't put a figure on the consultation. I think what we could do, I think it's pretty fair enough, is maybe write to the department and ask them, what size of prong do they think this is going to be? Maybe put it in different terms, but I suspect we might be writing saying, look, in terms of the overall strategy to try and deal with this problem that is concurrent, real and present, if this proceeded, what level of impact might it have, either operationally or what level of finance do they expect to raise? Something it's up to you.
No, and I don't really want to, but I think the thing about it is we use this analogy of a prong, and we assume there that the three prongs are of similar dimensions. But I just don't feel that they are. I mean, in my head, I'm nearly thinking actually, is it a three-pillared approach? Of which this is one brick or something like that of a pillar. But I mean, again, but again, coming back to, I just feel slightly frustrated that I don't think we're not any further on in understanding what advice is going to be given us. I'm frustrated at that too. I mean, as you say, Chair, we're here to hold this to scrutiny committee as such, and yet, we're essentially blank really when it came to what advice is going to be. I mean, well, sorry, Chair. Sorry.
No.
You hate to be negative, Chair.
No. Look, it's fine. Ultimately, I'll probably reflect it back to you, and probably that you imagine what I'm going to say. What more would you like, or what because I'm more than content to ask for additional evidence around. I mean, if it's a public affairs strategy, whoever wrote the three prongs would be having a field day. There's what sort of commission they'd be getting, and prawns have ever been talked about so much. I think I said prawns there, and I meant prongs. So, Andrew, what is your proposal in terms of what we write to the department to find out additional information? Do you have a couple of questions?
Well, I mean, I'm just reacting to what went on there. So to be fair, I don't. I've not sort of correlated these thoughts in my head on the back of that. But I think the general theme is, we don't know off the back of this consultation what sectors thought what of this plan, and I just find that very difficult to get my head around.
I understand
and that's
Okay, well let me suggest something. Our committee agreed that we write to the department and ask what either operational impact or what financial quantum the department feels that this prong will add to the overall strategy. You don't have to use the word prong there, Michael, when you write, but you probably will get a summary. Our committee members agreed on that?
Sure.
Okay, Justin?
Following on from what Andrew's saying, and the three-pronged approach, or as I see it, it's a bit of a three-strawed approach. there is no certainty on delivery of any one of the straws. Where does the department see certainty along their three-pronged approach? Are they certain about delivery on any of the prongs or straws? So it's a very useful political tool to use the three-pronged approach, but there's nothing really behind it. No real substance to it, and it doesn't give me any confidence there's going to be delivery on it.
Would you be content, maybe in terms of trying to get that phrased as a question to the department? What is the minister's view as to the evidence of delivery around the three prongs so far? Is that what you're? I mean,
and the capacity to deliver on them.
And the capacity to deliver, Michael. Is that?
Yeah. Again,
seriously,
just to surmise. I mean, we do get it. You know, we do ask the minister regularly about infrastructure. We do ask the minister about wastewater. We do ask the minister, and very often it comes back to this three-pronged approach. And I don't want to belittle the terminology of it, but I just feel that we've spent the 18 months I've been here, we've just been getting back, and yet I really don't feel any further along, Chair. Sorry for
no. Look, ultimately, Andrew, this is our job. I think Justin raised a very relevant point there. I think we will write, and I think it's absolutely right to ascertain from the department where they feel the progress around these prongs have got to, and where they feel that's going towards, and further to that, what impact, and particularly the evidence that we've seen today, what impact that's going to have. I think that's absolutely fine. Michael, you content with that?
Yes, Chair.
Yeah.
So as I understand it, so right to DFI, just to ask how significant developer contributions are towards the three-pronged strategy.
Mm-hmm.
What is the operational impact of this particular approach and quantum?
Mm-hmm.
And what evidence is there of delivery and the capacity to do so?
Yeah,
and members, officials offered to provide a list of organisations that had responded to the consultation.
People, Justin?
So it's capacity to deliver across all three.
All prongs.
All
prongs.
Chair, just I'm asking, what's the question about this presentation today? Exactly. I know. I need to know exactly.
Yeah, sorry.
Exactly. What are we asking here? Because we're just after finishing the consultation. So, what exactly are you asking? I mean, because the minister now has to decide one way. So, specifically, what are you asking? Sorry,
Michael.
As I understand, members are asking what the level of contribution to the three-pronged strategy developer contributions provide, and evidence of how that might be delivered in practice, and the capacity to do so.
I can imagine the response will get back, but I mean, if the majority of the committee wants to ask the question that way, that's fine. But
okay, members agreed? Agreed. Okay, fine. Okay, so that's clear. Item 8 is the active travel delivery plan. There is written evidence there. At page 355, we have the letter from the DFI DALO, and then we have at 357 the engagement report. This is the written paper that did not arrive in time for last week's meeting, and the committee had written to the Minister asking to ensure that departmental papers are provided in a timely manner in the future. Members will also recall that on the committee meeting on the 5th of November, it was agreed to schedule an oral evidence session in the forward work programme at a future date, and I'm sure we will do that if members are agreed to an oral evidence session on this written evidence. Are members agreed?
Agreed.
Okay. That takes us to item 9, which is a raised paper on car parking charges. A very good paper. I am going to go first to John on this one for his thoughts as Deputy Chair. I have a couple of questions, and then I'm going to open up the committee if they have any comments.
Oh, sorry, Chair, you crack on. I'm
Are you
just
sure?
up here. Yep.
Okay, so it was just interesting. There's a couple of bits that I picked up on in this paper just in terms of Northern Ireland and especially regarding charges that aren't usually enforced by councils, and these are the parking charges issued on private land, This is very often car parks that are attached to supermarkets or whatever. It was interesting just to note there that in the paper, these are not fines, as private parking companies have no official right to fine anyone. They are essentially PCNs. And in England and Wales, Section 56, Schedule 4 of the Protection of Freedoms Act 2012 allows landowners to pursue registered keepers of vehicles for unpaid parking charges if the registered keeper refuses or is unable to identify the driver at the time the parking charge was incurred, and this is called keeper liability. However, the interesting thing that I noted in this is this act does not apply in Northern Ireland. It means, and according from the raised paper, that if the registered keeper of a vehicle receives a parking charge notice, again on private land, they could argue they were not driving and so don't have to pay and are not obliged to reveal who was driving. I thought that was quite interesting evidence, as I get quite a few constituency queries around this sometimes from folk. So I also note that in June 24, the British Parking Association issued a joint private car parking code of practice, and essentially they're not very happy. I think it's a summary of how things stand in some ways, and that there may be further responses to a consultation that the government may run. The Code of Practice has been introduced in response to a parliamentary question in April 25, but the government said it would launch a consultation. The Code of Practice, that's something we may see coming down the tracks by Westminster. Those are just my comments on that paper. John?
Yeah, Chair, thank you. And I think it is a really good paper. It's not something we've dealt with too much at the committee, but as constituency MLAs will know, we get a lot of these, particularly the stuff around private car parking firms. There are companies who operate in Northern Ireland that think they are smart, that think they are clever, that think they know what they're doing, and what they are being gangsters and harassing members of the public. And I raised this in the chamber, as you maybe recall, where an elderly lady had received, I think, upwards of 60 letters for a fine. It transpired that she didn't even know. She was in hospital at the time, but had ultimately paid it, and it was only a family member found it. This happens regularly, and some of these companies are actually operating on land that's owned by councils and are contracted to councils. There is no law guiding them, and there is ambiguity and a slight loophole here, but that doesn't stop the harassment of constituents, and I do think it's worrying. I notice that in England, Scotland and Wales, new legislation and rules are being adopted or being developed at the minute to protect people against these companies who can get access, assuming that they comply with the codes of practice set up. They are allowed to access the DVLA records through the number plate recognition scheme. But I have checked, and some of these companies have tens of thousands of complaints against them, but continue to operate with impunity, having access to our data. I find that deeply concerning as well. I did ask the Minister if there was any plans to look at it to see if there could be any more protection afforded to the public, and that isn't something that's being looked at the minute, but I do think it would be advantageous to do so. I've also contacted the councils in my area asking why they feel the need to use these companies when there are plenty of others out there who don't operate in such a ridiculous manner. But sadly, it's more for noting at this stage, because there's not a lot, apart from it being very good information, nothing's really changing, except it gives clarification to those who do ask the question that there is this area of confusion in Northern Ireland regarding responsibility and ownership.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thanks for raising the issue. I mean, I get the same too, but the question is, John, obviously you haven't looked at to see how we can go about it. Can we get a paper on some solutions on how we could bring something forward? I mean, I know you've asked,
Minister.
To be fair, is there any, can we do a wee bit of follow up here and see what exactly? Because you're right. I mean, it is an issue, but I'm just wondering how would you go about addressing it? But maybe they have that. I don't know. I haven't put any thought into it, to be honest. But
I assume through the chair, Cahill, it would be the minister's purview and the department's plans. If other similar departments across these islands have brought in legislation,
legislative change. That's what
legislative change. There is nothing. It operates in a limbo space at the minute. There is nothing covering private car parks.
I know it doesn't apply. I'm just asking how we go about. If another paper chair, just see what goes on somewhere else. I mean, if there's lessons to be learned from it, grand, and I don't mind the minister come back, certainly.
Look, there's a range. I know Justin's indicated as well. Just to deal with that one particular issue, there's a range of things we can do. We can write to these companies and ask them to come in and give us, in the first instance, some written evidence and an oral evidence, and see what they say. The committee can do that. It's within its powers to do that.
I know that. I mean, all I'm saying. Sorry, Chair, I didn't cut across. I know the situation we're all done, but all I'm saying to you, for the quickest route, John is ready. We'll contact the minister. Look, there might be other solutions out there that maybe would get a wee bit of an idea from, but certainly, and over to you, Sarah, for the rest.
No. Like, I mean, I'm just highlighting what options we have. We have the paper here. The question really is what we do with it. I mean, let's all be honest. I don't think, given the amount of legislation that given the fact that we're dealing with one bill, there's a couple more being at least clearly signalled. There will be not. I did not expect the department to bring anything through on this in this mandate. They'd be crazy to even consider it because they won't have time, and that's fair and reasonable. In terms of ways forward. None of the members, Michael, have signalled anything in particular. I have flagged up that we can. It's within the purview of the committee to ask companies to come in. They can decide to or not to. But anything that from you that in terms of what you suggest is a way forward around this?
Well, first of all, Chair, just at one point to draw your attention to the disclaimer on the front of the research paper, just in case there are anybody out there listening thinking of not paying their parking charges. That this information provided to members of the Legislative Assembly in support of their duties. It's not intended to address the specific circumstances of any particular individual. It should not be relied upon as professional legal advice or a substitute for it.
Wise words.
Yes. So there was a proposal from Cahill to ask research to go back and look at how things are addressed elsewhere.
I don't know.
Course of action potentially, Chair. I've got one group that's been very helpful to myself and constituents and probably other members is both the Consumer Council and Trading Standards. They are a body who would give us evidence. I don't suspect some of these private gangsters are going to come in, and I will call them that because that's what they get on, like gangsters. I don't expect them to come in here. They are not.
Well, after you call them gangsters, John, I suspect, but you're covered by committee privilege.
I'll call them to their face. Some of these come, not all, but some of them get on. They harass the public, and that is what they're doing. But trading standards have been very helpful to myself and the other constituents, as have the Consumer Council, and they are all over the detail of this and potential outcomes. A potential option going forward would be that the department would be to license certain companies to operate under certain parameters. To provide the flexibility that would exist on normal on and off street car parks. That doesn't exist at the minute either here. For example, at the minute we're given, if you have 10 minutes over your ticket, you'll be given by the red coats a bit of flexibility. The camera system is an instant fine. There's no leeway, no flexibility, and no attempt to work with the public. And I think that's another frustration.
Well, sure, that's part of my question. I mean, if that's the way forward, without going to the research 100%, but I was only asking the way forward, and John said if his Consumer Council and Trading Standards can come in and give us advice on some of the stuff, 100%.
Do we want to, it's a pretty clear proposal, do you want to commission some written evidence from Trading Standards and Consumer Council in the first point?
If that members agreed.
Yes. Happy enough with that? Okay. Justin?
Thanks, Chair. And listen further to what John's saying. Private parking companies, the likes of Smart Parking, Civil Enforcement, Euro Car Parks, APCOA, they are a scourge on society, harassing people to extraordinary lengths, putting them under extreme duress and pressure by the correspondence that they issue. Usually very legalistic correspondence, frightening people with unfair levels of fines as well for the contraventions. It's incredible how this torments people at all levels from every walk of society. It needs to be addressed. What are the standards they must adhere by? What are the regulations that will govern these organisations? Are these engaged by the department? And who has control regulating them and the standards by which they must adhere. The level of advertising for these companies in car parks, where you go and park in these car parks assuming it's free, and next thing, bang, through your letterbox comes this legalistic fine and threat. So it's just totally unreasonable and unfair for people to be subjected to this continuously, and they need to be put, the reins need to be put on these organisations, because they do act as if they're money making racket. That's how they act.
Something tells me they're not going to come to this committee. But that notwithstanding, I think we have committee agreement to write to Trading Standards and the Consumer Council and Andrew.
Advice NI are a good. I've given a good advice to my constituents on that, so I'll just to add as well. Advice NI. Sorry, Chair, for.
It's okay. No. We can write to all.
That's to write to them for written submission.
Written submission
to,
with a view to we could have them in. Our committee members agree. Okay. Item 10 is subordinate legislation, SL1s that are not subject to assembly procedure. Okay, I need to advise members that there are 3 proposals, SL1, for statutory rules that are not subject to assembly procedures and are not required to be laid. These are listed on pages 452 to 460 of your pack, and they are SL1, the Waiting Restrictions Port Stewart Amendment Order Northern Ireland 2025, SL1, the Beaver Road Belfast Stopping Up Order Northern Ireland 2025, and SL1, the Parking and Waiting Restrictions Belfast Amendment Number 2 Order Northern Ireland 2025. The members have any issues they wish to raise on these proposals? Are members content with the proposals for the statutory rules? Item 11, Forward Work Programme. At page 462, we have our Forward Work Programme. Just want to remind committee members that the committee agreed to receive an oral briefing on the December-January monitoring round. And we've got that one covered. And we have covered that as well. And can I have committee agreement to proceed with the evidence sessions as set out in the draft Forward Work Programme and to reflect any decisions taken today?
Agreed.
Okay, and that takes us to item 12, which is AOB. Do any members have AOB? Nope. And that takes us to item 13, which is date, time and location of next meeting. I just need the committee to agree that the date of the next meeting will be on Wednesday the 19th of November 2025 at 10 a.m. in room 29 Parliament Buildings. Are we agreed? The meeting is adjourned.